doctors and nurses. There's no continued certification. There's continued education hours each year. Drives me nuts, I guess, for like ATMC accreditation for schools, that the instructor is like, oh yeah, 15 hours, and there's no real requirement of like who the training's from.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another exciting, thought-provoking episode of the Jaded Mechanic podcast. My name's Jeff, and I'd like to thank you for joining me on this journey of reflection and insight into the toils and triumphs of a career in automotive repair. After more than 20 years of skin, knuckles, and tool debt, I want to share my perspectives and hear other people's thoughts about our industry. So pour yourself a strong coffee or grab a cold Canadian beer and get ready for some great conversation.
And we are back. Welcome again to another episode of the Jaded Mechanic podcast. With me tonight's a good friend of mine, Tanner Brandt. Tanner, say hello.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, man. It's a pleasure. So you had a good day today?
I did. I had a busy day. Got my butt kicked a little bit.
On that Toyota?
Yeah.
Yeah, we were just talking about that. I shared the video. Is that kind of a... You say that one kicked your butt. That's not your hardest diags, right? Is it just what makes that one so hard?
So anytime that you have a input problem and you don't know what the inputs are supposed to be, it's always pain. That's becoming more and more of a thing. So it's kind of, I guess, my everyday life is getting my butt kicked, right? So being a mobile diagnostic guy and programming guy, the programming stuff normally isn't too bad unless it goes sideways, but for the most part it doesn't go sideways. It's the diagnostic stuff, and there's certainly, sometimes I get lucky and I show up and it's a fuse or something, but as of lately, a lot of times it's some kind of strange input problem like this one. And we were talking about not knowing what the inputs are supposed to be, not having any way to find out what the inputs are supposed to be. So if it's a parasitic draw problem or a window problem, or something is staying on, a cluster is staying on like that, sometimes not having the information needed in service info just makes it tough. And I kind of get called in as, I guess, the, like, I don't want to say, I guess, savior, I guess, would be the thing. And everyone's like, oh, this guy's going to fix it. But I don't know any more than anybody else does. And if they had the information needed, the inputs, they'd fix it too. So for me, sometimes they call me and they're like, oh, he'll figure it out. And I'm like, nah, it's, we all have the same information. I'm no smarter than anybody else. So it just means that I'm going to have to sit there and get my butt kicked for a while.
So the name of the company that is your business is?
Autodiag Clinic.
Autodiag Clinic. And you're out of North Carolina?
Yeah, North Carolina, South Carolina. I am right on the border.
Oh, a border person. Okay.
Yeah, I'm building a new house, and it's a South Carolina address, and I could throw a baseball into my neighbor's yard and hit the North Carolina border.
Oh, right on. Cool. And how long have you been there?
5 years, and originally from upstate New York, just across Lake Ontario from you.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah? Right on. Right on.
Yeah, I'm originally from a small town called Sodas Point, and the last place I lived was Oswego.
Okay, cool. I've been through Oswego a long time ago, and I'm familiar with that area quite well. Honestly, like it's we used to cross, if we were going to go, we'd cross over into Watertown, right? And
yep. So
that area, upstate New York, is, we've been to Lake Placid a couple times and stuff like that. So I'm pretty familiar with the area. It's been, I'm trying to think. Other than to fly to AST, I hadn't been stateside since pre-COVID, right? Because my communist country kind of shut all that down. But yeah, so what made you leave upstate New York and go to essentially Carolinas?
Yeah, so weather was a big factor. Knowing that I wanted to open the mobile business. So I had a shop in New York for about 4 years, and I also did mobile repair, but not for like normal customers. I did mobile repair for construction companies on like small engine tow behind equipment, and then fleet companies. So we would kind of do like fleet maintenance and stuff for them, and then had a regular shop too in New York. So did that there, knew that I wanted to switch over and kind of just do diagnostics. That's really difficult to do in my opinion. Some people do it. I mean, there's a lot of guys in Minnesota and stuff that do it, but it would have been tough in New York. Not a lot of like big shops, a lot of shops that don't have any space, don't have any parking. Yeah. So getting there, knowing the car could be covered in snow, trying to work when it's, 0 degrees out and snowing and blowing wouldn't have been great. So not really an easy way to do it in New York. And then taxes are cheaper here, which allowed us to, I was talking about building a new house. Having less property taxes here was just a thing of we could afford more and kind of have more of the life we wanted to have, not spend as much money. And it's certainly, I don't know, this area has changed a lot just in the 5 years that I've moved. It's very up and coming, so things have gotten more expensive. But most of the reason, weather, being able to open the business, very business friendly area, and cheaper cost.
Those winters in Oswego, they're a lot different. They're cold. Yeah, compared to what you guys get. Like, I know everybody always is like, I'm bragging on Canadian winters or something. And Minnesota gets cold too. I'm not trying to say that, but you know what it's like if you're sitting that close to the lake, right? It's a different thing. Like, you get some chill, man. I can remember, well, I haven't done it now in the last couple of years, but like 5 years ago, I was still doing road service for, a truck shop on the side of the road. Yep. And I can remember being out there lots of nights, 10 o'clock at night in a blizzard, trying to get somebody's truck started. And we get those blizzards, and you'd suit up at 6 a.m, and it'd be just one stop all day long. Next one. Some truck frozen, broken down, right? Get under there, crawl underneath, like try to get it started, try to get the air tanks, bled out so that they would build air again. Like, it was nonstop. It was, I've changed so many batteries and so many connections and just starters on the side of the road that it was like, with your hands are numb, right? And it's just, it's been tempting lots of times to go someplace.
Yeah.
So, but.
And getting slush sprayed on you. And I drove, one of the places I worked back home had tow trucks, and we had tow trucks and a service van. Now they got, I think, 2 service vans. And like you said, there's days where, you'd hop in the truck at 6 a.m. and leave. And one of like the last, I think, like months that I worked there, I was so overwhelmed with it. I had gotten a call from the guy that owned the shop's father, and he had gotten stuck with a snowmobile at like 11:30 at night, and he was in I call them a muck ditch. They're muck fields, and they fill in with snow, and sometimes you don't know how deep they are. So at any rate, he got stuck, and I went out and I rescued him, got his snowmobile out at 11:30 at night, and I was soaked. I was up to water, like up to my stomach. And I stuck all my stuff by the fire, got to bed at like 1 a.m., got up, got to work at 6 a.m. And the first call is a car in another muck ditch on the side of the road. Yeah. And I like look at the guy, and I felt bad. So afterwards, I realized I was kind of mean to him, but I'm like, I swear if I fall through this water, I'm done. Mm-hmm. And I like no more than walked over into the ditch to hook the car and just went right through, right up to my chest. And I was soaked for the day. I got back to the shop and just threw everything in the shop. And I'm like, I'm going home. And that was it.
Well, I mean, it's one of those, we'd get 4 or 5 really good days like that every season, right? And it really tests your mettle. And then it's just like, okay, well, people, I don't know if it's like every truck that skipped the fall maintenance and didn't bother to check the batteries or whatever just has to break down, right? Or something like that. But that's just the way it is. And it's just, it's not super complex work, right? It's just tough. It's like you're fighting.
It's miserable work. You're cold and you're getting beat up, and like I was saying, getting sprayed with slush on the side of the road. People, then you got to lay down underneath it. The road's wet. And I think, people that work in the north, I think that's what makes this job harder. It's significantly easier in warmer climates, I would say. Obviously, rust. I mean, that's something you and I have dealt with our whole lives up there. And I moved here. I just sent a picture to my dad like a week ago. I was working on a 2002 Chevy pickup. I was programming a PCM on it, and it was like mint condition. And I crawled underneath it and sent him pictures. And the shop owner is a buddy of mine. He goes, "What are you doing?" I go, "I got to send a picture of this to my dad." Like everything was just immaculate. Yeah. So there's no rust. There's no, you're not getting dripped on by salt and slush. So I think it's a big difference too of like your mental health too. I would say like working in a shop here versus working in a shop back there. Now you can obviously work with great people in both areas, but man, the work is just a lot harder up there. And when you're having a bad day and you hit your head on something and the slush just falls on you and it just ruins your day. And it just, I don't know, definitely harder, I think, working on stuff in the north.
And even the corrosion is different, right? When we add in like how many different, when I talk to guys and it's like, I'd see connectors that were prone to problems, right, on caravans and on Dodge trucks and all this kind of stuff up here because of their exposure. And you talk to them down there and it's like, well, we don't see that. And you're like, what do you mean? You don't see the TCM get all thick when it's putting the fender well on a caravan? Like, like down. No, we just pull the fender well back and it's clean and dry. And no, we'd see them. They're swelled up. Like they all look like the Ford, fuel pump driver modules, right? Like every module on the Dodges back then. So it's, I don't want to say that we have it tougher. It's just different situations, right? And it's cool, but it's, I think sometimes people don't understand, when it takes a little bit longer to account for those elements or to eliminate those variables or work around those variables. Because like I like cars that are undercoated to last, but I hate being covered in that stuff. You know what I mean? Like it's because my work shirts are short sleeves, so it's like it's all through my forearm hair. It's like it's in my beard. It's you've had your head stuck up around the drive shaft and you're trying to get an oxygen sensor out and you've got that all slimed into your face. Like it's just where you could go down south and undercoating, the car's just dry underneath. Like we don't need undercoating. So
exactly. It's a big difference. And like I say, people don't think about the mental health side of it, of just like what that does to you, how difficult it is and how frustrating it is. And, like just said, an oxygen sensor, something that's could be a 5-minute job here. Or I shouldn't say 5 minutes, like a 30-second job here. Reach up and quick break it loose and unplug it. And that's that. And up there, it's, heating it up and then break it free and then cool it down so you don't pull the threads out of it while it's hot. And so now you're waiting for it to cool. You cool it down. Now you're trying to get it out. You get stuff all over your arms and it just ruins your day and makes you so upset. So it definitely, I would say it's harder work up there, and not just harder work, but just, I don't want to say like harder, I guess it is definitely harder backbreaking, but just definitely harder mentally than working in other parts of the country for sure.
So tell me, what's a typical day for you?
Yeah. So depending on, I guess, how everything's scheduled, I always do programming in the morning and all the diagnostics in the afternoon. So I try to, I think the hardest thing for me with this business to switch about my personality was I'm always the person that was like, okay, the hardest thing is what I have to get done first, and then I'll have the easy stuff. So when I was working in a shop, I wanted hard stuff in the morning and then my afternoon would be easy, but I can't do that here with the mobile business because you got to get the easy stuff done so you make money for the day, and then you do the diagnostic stuff in case it kicks your butt and you don't figure it out so that you've made money for the day. If you do diagnostic stuff in the morning and it takes you all day and you didn't make any money. So normal day, get up in the morning. I try to do 4 to 6 cars a day, normally somewhere around 4. Anything less than that is okay too. Some guys will say they got to do 6 a day or something, but anywhere from 2 to 6, I'm pretty happy. 4 is a normal day. So get up, do some programming, and then normally like 1, 2 o'clock, I'll grab whatever cars I've got to diagnose for the day and go do that. And so I deal with repair shops, collision shops, new car dealers. Used to deal with used car dealers, don't deal with used car dealers anymore. The used car market down here is a disaster. So kind of nice get to hang out with other like-minded people. I kind of treat all of my customers as friends, I would say. I basis is that we're a team. So it's kind of nice to show up at their shop, talk to them for a couple minutes, program the car. If I've got 6 cars a day, then I'm in a hurry and I can't really do that. But most of the time I try to talk with the shop owners, check on them, see how they're doing. I ask each one, are you busy? Are you not busy? What's going on? And so, yeah, that's kind of what my day looks like.
So you said before when you were working in a shop, give us like, what kind of shop was that? Was it like an independent? Was it a dealer, chain store?
Yeah, so I've done both. Did dealerships. So first place I ever worked out of college, or I should say, I guess in college, I was a Toyota T10 student. Worked at a Lexus dealer and a Toyota dealer in college, and then pre-college, always worked at independent shops. So worked in independent shops first. Went to college, switched to dealers because of needing hours for Toyota. Got done with college, worked at a couple other dealers, Chrysler dealer and Hyundai dealer, and decided didn't like the dealership anymore. Yeah. Most of the dealerships up by me, I guess I would say, were not like well run. Everybody hated each other. The atmosphere was terrible, and pretty tough to make money. Very different too up there. January, February was slow.
Yes.
Pretty much like you might as well just go home. You had tire season, and then after tire season was done, you had January, February, did not really do anything.
September and October sucked because everybody after their kids go to school has no money. And then, January, everybody blows their budget during Christmas. So they're not fixing anything unless it's towed in, will not run, right? So yeah, until you get your snow tires season, like I said, people don't, like we were just talking off air, it drives the industry up here. It really does. March, April, you start to get a lot more flow back into the shop again. You start to get busy. You sell some work off of a tire job or whatever, right? You see those kind of semi-annual inspections and all that kind of stuff, and it drives some of the business. But yeah, January flat rate, I just starved. It was just, you just expected it, and the same as September. September and January were your 2 toughest months. And the dealership, I've always been, I don't regret working them because you get to really know a product inside and out, right? Like that's the beauty.
Yep.
But I hate the culture. I just hate it. I just, I understand to some point why they have to do it, right? Because it's a production machine. The overhead to turn the lights on every day is astronomical, right? To pay for all that inventory just sitting there, astronomical. But I don't agree anymore with the way they just look at everyone as just a number, I mean,
exactly.
You're just a tech number, and it sucks. You can get a lot, you can learn a lot, get some really good experience, but I just, until I think that they, pull their heads out of their butts figuratively and see that, they're going to get hit the worst. They already are, I feel, with the tech shortage. They have to change their business operation model. They're whatever you want to call it. Otherwise, they're not going to have anything.
I specifically remember like when I was in the T10 program, the deal was you were supposed to be given a mentor, and the mentor was supposed to stand behind you, tell you what to do. And I was 17 years old. I walked into the Lexus store. They put my name up on the wall like I was a regular tech and just started giving me work. Like I should not have been touching people's cars to begin with. I could do oil changes and stuff, but like there was no oversight, and I didn't learn anything. The only thing I learned was that everybody in that dealer hated each other, and I learned not to turn in uniforms because if you turned in a uniform, you never got any of them back. Those were the 2 things that I learned at that dealer. Like, and not to overfill an oil bucket. I did do that while I was there. The perfect example of like way it was, the guy that was supposed to be my mentor, I had headphones on because everybody there had headphones on because they didn't want to talk to each other. So I had headphones on and I'm doing an oil change on a car, and he walks over and he just taps me on the shoulder and then points behind him and laughs and walks away. And I'm like, huh? And I turn around and there's just a geyser coming out of my oil bucket. So I did learn that there, but like that was a lesson that realistically I shouldn't have had to learn. Yeah. Somebody should have been like, hey, make sure each morning you drain this so that this doesn't happen. Now granted, I've learned that and remembered it for the rest of my life, but still I would have remembered it as well if somebody had just shown me.
Yeah, pretty big red flag about the culture though, right? When you walk into you see it, like you go to a bunch of different shops, right? If you see a shop like that where nobody wants to talk to anyone else, guys, like you said, guys are going around with headphones on, like that's wow. I mean, I've been in some shops where there was definitely cliques, like we didn't talk to them and they didn't talk to us, but never where it was like every man was out to avoid any kind of interaction with anyone else, right? Like it wasn't, never got that toxic.
What happened there, I blame it on, and again, like I didn't know this stuff back then, and now I look at it because I go to so much training and sit in on all this management training, and I understand that some of these ideas that the dealership training people are preaching like is not good. It's not a good idea. That one was a team flat rate system. Yeah. So in theory, they're like, oh, this will be great. No, all it did is if somebody had a bad day, everybody was against him. So then, so-and-so took the day off. That's going to screw our hours up. And even though he had vacation, or, so-and-so hurt his hand, that's going to slow us down. Or this guy got stuck on this car. So it just made everybody out to get each other. And then looking at it, I guess even when it's not a team flat rate system, when you're in a shop and the work is slow, like we were talking about September and January, February, now everybody's fighting for work and that's my car. They took it away from me. And so they don't think about the atmosphere that it creates, I guess. And looking back, that should have been a sign right there of like how the dealers were run.
The only thing I hate worse than flat rate is flat rate team. And I never had to work it because as much as we all maybe were competing against each other in any dealer I've ever been, if they all sat us down and said, okay, you're going to be teams, there'd have been a revolt right there. There's just no way, because they're like, how it'd be like picking teams in dodgeball, right? Like there's always 4 or 5 at the end of it that you don't want on either team, right? And that's just toxic. And the idea that they think that boost production, I think it's like the last stopgap that they can do before they say flat rate definitely is not working in our shop, but they don't know how to change, right? Because I don't want my hours pooled, right? So that this, team does this and we're all shooting for a bonus on an already crappy hourly rate, right? Like I don't want my hours pooled. If I get just to hit a string of luck, I want it to be my string of luck. If I hit a string of bad luck, it's still mine. I don't want everyone else grumbling, oh, look at that, if he hadn't got all those crappy jobs, our team would have, beat team B, right? That's it just adds more to it. I don't want that, right? Like I want to be the idea when everybody says, it's a team. It's not a team. You're not a team player as a flat rate tech in a shop, right? We all have to I've seen those shops where if a car needs to be pushed in, I've seen the guys have to push it in himself because he's so hated that nobody wants to go out there and help the guy because he's a jerk.
Yep.
But, you can't have that. It just doesn't work. But I'm amazed how some shops can pay. Well, I know how they do it because somebody in dispatch or whatever is watching very closely and they're keeping everybody pretty close to one another. I think that's the only way that it works, because otherwise I've worked with some real sharks and not a whole lot of regard for, selling. Like they just sold all day long and they did the work, and they did the work. But it was like, as soon as you allow one to come to that level, then everybody is looked at in the same way and said, well, how come, he becomes a golden child? Well, he's turning 60 a week. How come you're not turning 60 a week? Well, he's pretty aggressive with the pen. What are you talking about? It's unhealthy. So I thank God I've never worked team, never. But
yeah, I worked at another dealer that we had that golden child. And when I worked there in college, and then I went back there years later. This is actually, I moved home. I had came down to South Carolina for 6 months to work at a shop. Actually, it was the shop I was at today. Mm-hmm. worked for him for 6 months to help him. I basically came down to kind of train his guys, and then I moved back home. And when I moved back home, I went back to work at that Toyota dealer. And at that time, they had one of the golden childs, so I'll call them. And they kind of told me like, oh, this guy's turning 80 hours a week. You should be able to do it. And after a week, I immediately realized what was going on. And he just like destroyed everything. Like my daily events were let him do some things in the morning, and then my afternoons were, okay, I've got to extract this broken bolt out of a caliper. I've got to extract this broken bolt out of a differential. Like most of my day was spent like fixing stuff. And then after a month, I'm like, I don't have any hours. And so I kind of went to the service manager and I'm like, I got no hours. And he's like, well, you have to work harder. And I'm like, I showed him all this stuff. I'm like, this is what I've done every single day that I haven't got paid for. And it's cleaning up after this person. I'm like, I'm totally fine with it. Don't have an issue with it. Part of a team, here to help, but like somebody's got to figure out how to pay me for that, because I can't just work all day and do that. So yeah, it's certainly, I don't know, that's, I guess, my issue that I see with the dealers is they're just not always well run. In their defense too, sometimes they become a revolving door, and service manager may not be the best person. He's not there long term. Techs aren't there long term. It's kind of difficult, and it's like you said, it's a big machine, a lot of overhead, and sometimes there's not enough oversight, I guess I would say, in like the actual owner of the dealer. Sometimes the owner of the dealer got left to him and they didn't have anything to do with it until it got left to them. They don't know anything about it. So that was always my issue. And that's kind of why I started to switch and move away from dealers, I guess, and started going towards the independent. And then, once I got involved with IATN and realized what was going on in, the independent, and learned about training and started being able to go to training and stuff, that was when I really kind of just realized that like the days of dealership work for me were done, and that you didn't have to hate your life. It's bad enough we all got to work every day, right? If we'd all, I'm sure, like to do something else. Now, I enjoy working on cars. I always did, and I am fortunate. I'm one of those people, I would say, that I love what I do, and so it's not really work to me. But at the same time, I like riding my bike. If I could ride my bike every day too instead of doing anything, I would probably do that.
Oh,
so,
dude, if the Bassmaster would sign me up, just give me an opportunity, right, to scrub in for somebody that can't make it next week. It wouldn't matter if I made 7 figures fixing cars, right? And they tell you might make 20,000 to fish that tournament. You'd hear the boat fire up right now. I'd be gone. Like, it's just,
yeah,
I can fix cars, but I mean, what I truly love to do is, that. So the trend I saw in the dealerships, and I think it's happening more and more, is that the dealer groups have like a management team. And when they have a low performing or a failing dealer, they bring in that whole team, right? A manager for parts, a manager for sales, a manager for service, a general manager. And then you see the cutting block come out, right? And it's scary. And the dealer that I worked at for so long, they're going through right now, they're being bought by a bigger dealer group in Ottawa. And that's, I think, is what's going to happen in there. And it's going to be, I mean, I've been gone from there 10 years now, but I talk to quite a bit of the guys, right? And it'll be interesting to see how the chips fall when it's done.
Yeah.
But that's what I found is like this, the Nissan dealer I was at, same thing. It got bought out. They brought a team over from another dealer. They start to turn this around, turn that around. And you see some people that were like, some people get treated better. Some people get recognized as, okay, this person was being held back. And then others, it's just like, they're gone. Like there was no hope for them. And they call that a building process, but I've never really seen it build anything but profits for, the dealer group. I've never seen it ever rebuild the culture in the shop, right? I've never seen it fix that. So,
yep. And sometimes like they don't know that the dealer group that they hired or management group that they hired might not be the right people to come in and do it. Sometimes you make a bad judgment call on a hire. Sometimes you make a bad judgment call on a coach. I see it because I deal with over 160 shops right now. And I have shops that work with management groups that are great. I have shops that work with ones that get marched into the fire. And I kind of know, I guess, because I'm involved obviously in the training side of when I see a shop sign up, I will go in and be like, hey, watch out for this. And like particularly one of them recently got involved with a management company. And I told him, I says, just be aware that a lot of times their shops end up becoming revolving doors and they lose employees. And the last time I was at his shop, he's like, I lost 2 employees. And I thought about what you said. And I'm like, and it has to do with the workload that they put the shop under and the workload that they put the techs under. Not so much like that they treat the guys like crap or tell them to fire them, but they just put the techs under a lot of stress, put the owner under a lot of stress, and that leads to environment problems. And then people start leaving. So at any rate, sometimes the dealers don't realize that, or the dealer principal that hires X company doesn't realize that maybe that's not the right move. They saw all over Facebook or all over wherever that, that's the best company. Well, it might have just been the company that spent the most money on marketing to get out there.
Right. I mean, there's a couple of big players and in the industry that, and we're not going to mention names. We don't need to, but it's like, do you see, because again, you see a lot more shops than I do. Do you see some of what they call coaching tactics or whatever, coaching methods that's trickling down into the independent sector? Does it seem like it's a lot of what has already just been done in a dealer?
Some of it has. There's a lot of, so there's 2 different methodologies, I guess I would say, just to like simplify it. Mm-hmm. There's making sure that your margins are good and you're being profitable on every single car. And then there's the just do as many cars as possible and your margins will follow. So the just do as many cars as you can, that's always, in my opinion, what's kind of been like the dealership model. Mm-hmm. And because of that, then they're not paying attention to, are they actually profitable? In those shops, my opinion, I see all of them struggle with profits. They always are busy, but they're the shops that don't have money to send people to training, or they're struggling to send people to train. They're not going to shut down and send, 4 people. And I always kind of give them a hard time. I go, look, this is pretty stressful. Like, you're trying to feed this machine. You need, let's say, I just throw a number out there. Let's say 500 cars a month or something they want to get. And then you have another shop that's like, if we do 50 cars a month, I'm really happy. And they're super profitable because they're like looking at every single car, maximizing profit off of each car, setting customers up so they know, okay, next month I'm going to need this, this, and this, or, in 3,000 miles, I'm going to need this, this, and this, and really kind of building that culture and building that customer base and stuff, where the other ones are just trying to take in as much as they can. So there's definitely some trickle down there. I haven't seen any of I shouldn't say that. I've seen a couple dealership trainers try to bridge the gap and come into the independents, but not too many.
Mm-hmm. I think it's a different world, right? Because we forget, when you're at the dealer, the customer comes in a lot of the time and they have a warranty complaint, but at the same time that they're there, they're going to get their service done, because it's due anyway, right? And it's just like, I got this squeak noise, or I got this rattle or whatever, or this clunk or something. I'm coming up on an oil change. I'll get it looked at while I'm there. That's the whole reason that I think that they see as many recalls and warranty work now in cars. Is I think that is absolutely planned for retention at the dealership. I don't think there's any, because you can't tell me when they're building this stuff in their engineering and they're going through R&D that they go, they know that that's going to be a problem area. They know that's going to be a weak point, right? They know that tie rod is going to not last, as an example. But it's like, we'll get them back in the dealer. We'll sell them an oil change. We'll sell them some. I think it's completely, totally engineered, Whereas when you're an independent, you know what that's like. It's like they're not bringing it to you until they want to service it, or it's really broke. It's just, those are the 2 things. They're not coming in because it's, they can live with something that's out of warranty. They can live with that annoying, like a wind noise, right? Once it's out of warranty, you don't see too many people fixing it, right? It does get done, but I mean, it's just they reach over and turn the radio up, right? But so when you're in an independent, they're coming in because they legitimately need that car looked at. It won't run right. It doesn't stop right. It doesn't start half the time. They want it fixed. So we have to be much more diligent about how we treat that customer, because it's a legit thing for them. They're actually willing to pay money to get it repaired. And that was something I struggled with, because it was like, I'm just by nature, I'm quick to judge, and I make too many assumptions in life. Right. And it's like, somebody's coming into an independent shop and they're to me, they're complaining about something that's not that big of a deal. But you realize, well, the door rate's over $100 an hour. They're coming in to complain about it. They're going to spend a couple hundred to get this resolved minimum. It must really bug them. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So that took some adjustment for me to go from the dealer to that, or, in the dealership, we always think a lot of the time it's operator error. They just don't know how something is supposed to work, right? I can't get my phone to link to the radio and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But I mean, when you're coming to in the independent, they're not dreaming this up. It's legit happening. Just because you can't duplicate it, they didn't imagine it. It's when they say the car, it just wouldn't start. They're serious. It just didn't start. And then, it's in your bay and it starts 100 times, right? Like, how do you go and it was hard for me to keep my attitude right to process into the diagnostic portion of trying to get to the bottom of it, right? In the dealership, that'd be like, no fault found, kick it out the door, go get something that paid, and roll on. I'm not ashamed to say that. That's what, without telling us, that's what is expected. Because you know how that is. You go to the tower and they go, did you make it a headway on that? No. I'm frazzled, man. I don't know what's going on. Okay, well, put it on the back burner for now. Here, take this, and we need this done. That's how the dealership works, right? At the independents, that one customer is just as important as the next customer. And it's, that's what you're trying to sell, I think, a lot of the time is that feeling. I mean, it's not exactly like that. That's just, we'd be lying if we said every shop owner out there treats every customer exactly the same, right? We all have our favorites, but you're at least treating them better, I think, sometimes than some of those people at the dealer that there's a stack of work orders and that stack is just immediately labeled time wasters, and we put that to the bottom. That's the 2:00 and on stuff that we get to at the end of the day to see, because it's, that drove me crazy.
Right.
That drove me nuts. Like, it was 8 a.m. at the dealer was always super stressful, because we always had probably 50 appointments at 8 o'clock every day that we were ever 50 appointments.
And that was a big thing in the dealer world, and I would say shops that were less well run when I was growing up, is schedule all the waiters in the morning. Oh. Then everybody that works for you dreads coming in the morning, because the morning's going to be a mess. In the last shop that I worked at in New York, I actually sat the owner down. One of the best guys that I ever worked for. He was the guy that, I'll go into this part of it afterwards, but I had a tool allowance from him that I started using for training, and that was what allowed me to get into training. But he would schedule waiters sometimes in the morning, and he was an older gentleman that had retired, and he opened the shop so that his son could eventually take it over. His son was a dealer tech, and he wanted to get his son out of the dealer. But when he would schedule waiters in the morning, it would frazzle him.
Oh, yeah.
So every morning he would come in and he was frazzled, and I would just stand at my toolbox. Well, me standing at my toolbox then frazzled him, because he was concerned that I was upset with him waiting. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, no, it's fine. Take your time. Well, what I ended up starting to do is I sat him down one day and I said, Tim, I'm going to come in 20 minutes later, because if I don't stand at my toolbox, then it's going to help you to not feel stressed. So I would purposely come in later on, and that helped him. And then eventually I was like, just stop scheduling waiters. It frazzles you. You don't need to be frazzled in the morning. Just tell them to drop it off.
There's no reason.
So he stopped scheduling waiters, or we'd spread them out through the day so he had time and stuff. And that helped him. It helped him, and it helped everybody, so that everybody came in the morning. They were kind of relaxed. You grabbed a couple cars and they weren't waiters, and you had the first like hour to just kind of work on stuff. Maybe you were doing inspections on cars or whatever, but we got rid of the waiters in the morning, and that helped, and it also helped him.
Yeah. We had two trends that happened at the big dealer that I was at that would drive you crazy. We had two guys that would show up habitually late, half an hour every day, because if you went, so we were on automated dispatch, which had codes, right? Labor dispatch codes, which again was another loophole that they would, if you put down, I forget what it was, 01 or something, which was just general. If you put that in the top line, it would flag to anybody in the shop. Didn't matter what. So it was just like you put 01 and then it could be like a transmission complaint. Anybody would pick it up. And then you're like, what the heck? Why am I picking up this transmission fault? Oh, yeah, because somebody started 01 at the top, right? And put it as priority. Waiter trumped everything. So if you put a waiter down and we'd go out to the advisor and I'd be like, where's this customer? I need to road test this. Like, I'm not hearing it. Oh, well, they're at home. Well, they're supposed to be waiting. Yeah, they're waiting at home. Okay. We'll throw that back in the pile, right? And then the techs, it got to be so bad where we had a handful of techs that would show up 30 minutes late because then the real crap work was already dispatched. And that would drive you nuts too, right? Because you're there following the rules, doing what you're supposed to, and you're seeing two guys kind of walk in. It's like, they're not doing the first 10 sets of tires right in the morning. They're going to pull that first timing belt ticket or whatever, like tune up or whatever. And you're like, Jesus Christ, like I'm on my second set of tires here by 8:45 and, he's rolling into a tune-up job. Like it's, it was that kind of stuff. So that's where I saw a lot of the I'm not a team player, I'm out for myself attitude, right? Was because, and I get it because you could they've heard me all say it before, you could solve the most complex problem on Monday. It didn't matter. So it could have been passed around the shop, like, 4 other techs had a kick at it. You get it, you solve it. Tuesday morning, here's a tire job at 8:00 in the morning, first thing. It's just like, makes you want to pull your hair out, like what do I have to do here? It's not that I'm not too good for tires, but I was always the type where it's like, this is what I like to do. You have some guys that struggle with it, but they're really good at this. I don't mind if you feed me it. I don't care if it's warranty or retail. Just, I want to see it done right. Give it to me. And, in a perfect world, that works really well when they do that. But it's a scheduling nightmare, right? Because if you go into one and it's, well, you know what it's like, right? You were talking about you book your program in the morning so you can make enough money for gas, at least for the rest of the day. And then you go and tackle your problem cars in the afternoon. I very much was like, I wanted, 3 work orders in the morning, diagnostics, and then that helped set me up. Okay, so this one's going to need, a starter. This one needs a transmission control module. This one I'm going to need more diag time because I've got to, open up the harness and find where the brake is, right? Run an overlay, whatever. Give me a couple EVAP ones in the meantime, while we're waiting on them, and I'll bang that out real quick. Like, misfire, give me some of that. Give me like updates. But I didn't want to walk in at 8:00 and do 4 tires and then see how the dispatch goes, go over to that guy who's really like not strong at diag, and he pulled the ticket and he struggled with it, make a wrong call. The car comes back, the next day, 2 days later, next week, and then it gets rolled to me. You know what I mean? That drove me crazy. I worked with some guys that's like, you saw them do something on Thursday and you were working Saturday, you reconsidered working Saturday because you knew that car's coming back. It's going to need about, 100K kilometers. It's going to rerun the monitor. It's going to flag the light again, and it's going to be back in, and you're working this Saturday, and guess who gets it? You. Like, that,
and then the customer's upset, and you're dealing with an upset customer who showed up. My light's back on. I want to wait, and I'm mad. Yeah,
and it's Saturday, right? Like Saturday was already, I hated work. I mean, I didn't hate working them, but I worked a lot of them. But it wasn't my favorite thing to do. But I worked them because, I needed to make the hours. But it was just, it would start to drive me nuts because it's like, that, that EVAP wasn't diagnosed properly. So he's going to clear it. It'll come back in on Friday, right? It's not the purge solenoid. shucks, crap. Now what do we do? Oh, it's a broken wire and harness. Don't worry, Jeff will find that. That's just, it was tough. I learned a lot, but I mean, I don't recommend it to people starting out. I can't do it in good faith. Say, yes, go sign up, no matter what they always, like you were talking about your T10 program and all that kind of stuff. I wish when they draft up those programs for the kids that are coming out, that somebody that was a senior tech somewhere sits them down and say, okay, so this could happen when you start in this shop. There could be some politics going on. This is how you navigate it, because it's one thing to know how the product is built and how it works. But I think we need to be, and this is part of the reason I want to do these kind of podcasts, is for young people listening. This is the reality that when you go out into the workforce, that it isn't the technical side of it. It's how do you survive that? How do you navigate it, right? How do you come into a dealership and thrive without drawing that big bullseye on your back?
Yep. Oh, yeah. And you just brought up something, too, that I think is important. You were talking about working Saturdays. Mm-hmm. Dealership life, that was a pretty common thing. Dealership was at least open Saturdays. Sometimes they were even open Sundays. And chain stores around here, I'm going to pick on Firestone because Firestone's open Saturday and I think Sundays. But at any rate, open weekends, and the guys all work long hours. And not only did I dislike doing that when I had to, I used to work 6 days a week pretty commonly. Now that I guess I'm at the level that I am doing what I do, I could not do this 6 days a week. My brain would be way too fried. So I look at it and I get asked all the time, Tanner, how do you do what you do? How did you get to this level? And a big part of it is I stopped working weekends. I stopped working 12 hours a day. And there's all those guys that, we should work more and stuff. And I used to be that person. Now I realize that my brain was so fried from doing that. And like, I also used to be, just up until, 2 years ago, I used to be real bad about stay up real late till, IATN chat. Mm-hmm. I think you'll remember those days of staying up real late. I was like 18 years old hanging out in IATN chat till 2 a.m. and stuff. And I realized that if I didn't get 7 hours of sleep, my brain was fried. Yeah. And to diagnose vehicles that are just, everybody's given up on, and then they come to me and I get this praise of, you figured it out. Well, some of the reason I figured it out is because I don't work Saturdays. I work 5 days a week. I try to work 4 days a week if I can. I try to sleep minimum 7 hours a night. Like, I try to take time off, and people really don't consider the mental side of like what your brain has to go through. And there's days that I get home. Tonight will be one of those days from thinking through that Forerunner. Yeah. There's nights that I get home that, like, physically wise, so I'm a cyclist too, and I run a little bit. I try to avoid running, but I ride my bike 25 to 50 miles pretty regularly. Oh. And I get home and I'm like, I could get on my bike and ride, but my brain is so fried that I will probably pull out in front of a car. Like, I'm just mentally tired. So people don't think about, and the dealerships don't think about, and the chain stores don't think about, like, if you want to take on diagnostic stuff and you want somebody to succeed, working 6 days a week, 10 hours a day is not going to work. That person may be able to do it for a short amount of time, and maybe they can do it for 20 years, but that person's mental health after 20 years is going to be terrible. Like, there's a lot of that stuff that isn't thought through.
Yeah. And it comes with not setbacks, but it comes with a cost, right? Like, we've all had them, those cars that like keep you up at night, that drive you crazy, I was just talking, I've talked with Brenda Dills. I was talking like all these people, and it's like those cars, you come in and it's still sitting in your bay, from the day before and the day before, or it's sitting in the corner of the parking lot, and you've ordered a part, but you're not 100% confident. So it's like, it's out of your mind. It's in there, but it's not really, because you see it every time you go and get another car and you bring it in, it's sitting there. That people if you haven't been in the business, and I mean like in it, not just like, I was a service advisor. If you don't know what those cars do to you when you're thinking about, man, was I right? Was I wrong? Is it going to fix it? That Mrs. Smith's intermittent no start that we never really narrowed it down. Like those things keep you awake at night, right? So this idea that, everything is equal hours, everything is about time. That's not, because that kind of work plays on you at a different level. It's just one thing to go, okay, I got to stress about making hours. Cool. I appreciate that. But I have to stress about making hours, and I have to stress about the complex level of repairing the automobile. That's a different toll, right? It takes a different toll on a person. It's just like you said. That's why when I moved back home and I started fishing again, my mental health just like skyrocketed into a much better level, because that's the one activity in my life that I can go out there. And it seems like people are like, it's such a basic thing. You're friggin' right. It is. It's such a basic thing. I'm trying to catch little green fish, but it's the one thing in life that I do. It's not my phone. It's not watching YouTube, because all that is car stuff. When I'm out on the boat, I don't even think about the shop, right? I don't even think about a car. I am so uber focused on that little green fish and what I'm doing to catch it, and all the different variables come to that. It's the only thing so wintertime for me, I get really into the industry, right? I get my passion, I get worked up, but as soon as, we got about a month now, and those little fish are going to start to come in season, and I'm going to be a completely different person, right? I'm going to be much more relaxed, upbeat, happy, devil may care type of person, because I'm getting my stress relief out. I'm getting my, I'm being able to unplug. And I think that we have to, at some point in this industry, start to teach our young people how to do that too. Because with this tech that's coming, if we don't teach them how to do that, we're going to have even worse burnout. Like we'll achieve getting them in, but it'll just meat grinder them up. Like there'll be no way around it, because it's when you're thinking about the next level that's coming in, right? Whew, it's a lot. It's going to be even worse than anything I've ever seen.
Yeah,
like somebody's self-driving car. Like,
yeah. Yeah, there'll have to be a lot of changes to the way shops are run, the way vacation is taken, what the atmosphere is in the shop. And like you were saying, I agree completely too that I think the OEs are eventually going to come in and start forcing the dealers or take away the franchises. I think Cadillac was one of the ones that gave a bunch of their dealers the option to take a buyout and walk away. So most of the OEs, so the ones that I've worked with some of their like recruiting departments and stuff, most of them are pretty good of like understanding what people want and like trying to reach out to companies like Wrenchway and stuff that are more involved in saying, okay, you've been around for a while, your presence is with technicians, what do the technicians want? Most of the OEs are pretty good about that, so I think we'll see a positive change there. My concern is when the cars are outside of warranty, how do they handle, or do they just say, nope, we only work on cars, inside of warranty. After that, then they just get kicked. I'm not sure how that'll go yet. But hopefully, it'll be for the positive going forward, and we'll start to kind of work through some of those things and understanding that not only do we have to do better as far as training them so like do the work, but we also have to do better for work environment and making sure that they're taken care of when they came in, they're trained well, they understand, well, hopefully the politics of it will kind of start to go away, but until then, that they understand the politics of it. How do you work through it? How do you set up apprenticeship programs and stuff like that? North Carolina has been very forward thinking in setting up apprenticeship stuff, and you have Red Seal now. Explain, I guess, the Red Seal thing quick, because I've heard there's good and bad to it, but it, I guess, forces apprenticeship, kind of.
Exactly. It forces an apprenticeship. If you want to legally, air quotes, legally fix cars, you're supposed to be Red Seal certified. 310S is the designation I have. It's essentially automotive service technician, 310S. I don't know what the code number means. It's not all that important. 310S is light duty. 310T is trucks. So, and I say trucks, I mean like a Ford F550 and bigger, an 18-wheeler, that kind of stuff. Now, it used to be years ago, you just became a red seal mechanic and you got both. You could work on an 18-wheeler to a Ford Pinto. It didn't matter. You could work on it all. You could sign the safety on it. That's the big thing here, is that you can go into a shop and work, or at least before you could, but you couldn't sign a car as being safe to sell for a resale for a used car if you weren't what we call certified, licensed, red seal, whatever you want to call it. It's had different names. They used to call it Class A mechanic. Everybody say, "Oh, you're Class A mechanic." That was what you. I'm a Class A. It means that essentially you take on an apprentice and they log, I think it's 10,000 hours on the job through different so they're given a trade standards book, and in the trade standard books would be like your AC air conditioning fundamentals, your transmission fundamentals, your gear train fundamentals, your electrical fundamentals, your engine fundamentals, all of that. And it'll be, each one is broken down into separate categories so that you understand, okay, you understand a planetary gear set. Your mentor signs it off. Yes, he does. He has proven, or she has proven, that they understand. To the next thing, do they understand a hydraulic flow through? And on and on and on until you have this book with like 500 sections in it, say, all signed off saying, yes, you understand. And then you go and you write. So at the end of 10,000 hours, it takes about, on the job, 3 years. Within those 3 years, you do, I think it's 4,000 hours or 8,000 hours of classroom. It works out to a lot. About 4 months every year, you go and you do either, like when I went, I would go and I would do 2 months. January, February, halfway through March. About 10 weeks, say, where you're in a classroom taking instruction at normally college from a trade certified instructor. Normally they're older retired mechanics, and they teach you just like how you would teach, right? This is Ohm's law. This is, 4 strokes of an engine, that kind of stuff. And you sit, and then next year you come back and you do it again and you do your 3rd level. After you do that and you pass all of those tests and all of those classroom environments, and there's labs, right? So then you go out into the shop and they rig up, they bug a car, right? Go find the open wire. Once they've done all that, then you write your final exam, and you pass your final exam. You're now licensed as an automotive technician. Then you can essentially, you go out in the industry, you get paid more, and you can, for all intents and purposes, the difference is you can sign a safety that says this car is safe to be sold. This car is safe. That's what it is. Quebec up here doesn't recognize it. Every other province does. The idea with getting a red seal was that meant that you scored a certain level on the test, and that meant that license could go to any other province in the country other than Quebec, and you'd be recognized as licensed. You could immediately go in, look at a car, deem that it was safe, and the car would be certified to go on the road for sale. That's how it is. It is. So when I hear people go, "Oh, well, that's what every state, in the union needs, and it's going to fix all the problems," it doesn't, though, because it's only as good, like you talked about, as the mentoring that you're putting onto that young apprentice, right? The way you're teaching them, the skills that you give them, the methods that they don't shotgun the part, actually learn how to diagnose it. If you're in a shop where somebody's not teaching them that, yes, it's just, okay, he signed off the book that says he understands it. He goes and takes the test. He gets, it's multiple choice questions. It's normally B or D. He picked B and D enough. He passed, right? He goes out there and he works in the workforce. It's cool. He gets a job. He's paid. But it's like me, right? My book is signed off saying I understand automatic transmissions, right? But I have not taken an automatic transmission apart and put it back together since I did it in trade school. And I'll tell you, right, when I did it in trade school, half the parts are missing because it's been apart 100 times, right? So yep. Would I tell you that I'm competent in transmissions? No, Not at all. Not like the guy that has only ever worked in a transmission shop. So the loopholes or the holes in the system, you may have a guy that has apprenticed at a transmission shop. He is phenomenal at transmissions, right? Really good. But he might sit down for the test and there's 40 air conditioning questions on it. He may have never hooked up a set of gauges to a car in a transmission shop, right? Other than maybe to evacuate it to work on if it removing something to access transmission. No idea about necessarily the function and the diagnostic process of that system, right? But so this is the holes that we always said was in the apprenticeship system in Canada, was because depending on your work experience had a real big factor into how well you were prepared for the industry, which is that's not just exclusive up here. We can say that about any shop in the country, right? And on the continent, for that matter. You're only going to be as good as what you're taught on the shop floor. Period. If you have good people teaching you, you're going to do well. If you choose to take it in. If you're being trained by questionable people with questionable morals and ethics, you've got an obstacle in front of you, right? So it is not a solution. I want to say that it is a good process up here, and it is a good place to start. And I brought it up in the group a couple weeks ago, and it didn't go over well because up here it's mandated by the government. The provincial government designed it. They implicate it. They police it. I have to register every 3 years. I have to pay X amount of dollars to keep my certification valid. There is no retesting. That's the cool part. There is no retesting. So somebody that we used to joke, they wrote their test in 1976. In 2006, they could still be licensed.
Right.
There was never an EFI question on their test when they wrote it in 76. But they're still a licensed tech. They're still earning the top tier pay in a dealership, for example, right? Senior tech makes X amount. Apprentice makes this amount. They might not be. Their skill set may be really far behind, right? There's a lot of guys that maybe if they were to sit down and write the test 30 years later, they wouldn't pass it, So recertification is just as important as certification. 100%. I think that this industry, and this is going to be the caveat that's going to get a lot of people, will be the obstacle, is because I think if we took so many people in our workforce and said, cool, you passed. It's like ASE, that argument. Okay, let's recertify. Let's make sure that you're still, understanding. You're still keeping up to date with the tech. What do you do with that person if they write that test, Tanner, and they fail?
Right.
Do you bump them in pay? Did you terminate?
Yeah.
It's a slippery slope. I took a long time before I wrote the test because I hate taking tests. And when I did write it, I scored 89%. Really a pretty high mark. Now, there's guys that score higher, but I mean, I did better than I thought. But I was the last one in the classroom to finish writing the test. I sat there and some kids wrote it in an hour, and I think it was 500 questions.
Right.
And there was a kid, he wrote it in an hour and a half. I don't know what he got. I never saw him again. He wasn't a classmate of mine. It's like we show up at a building, we go up to room, whatever, we sit down. You could be sitting next to somebody that's writing a trade exam for HVAC, right? They're not techs. They're just people writing trade exams that day. But I knew he was an automotive tech because of how he was dressed. And he wrote it. And he walked out in an hour and 20 minutes. I never saw him again. I'd never seen him before. I don't know if he passed or not. I was the last automotive tech to finish writing that day. And I flipped that down and I'm like, oh, I think I got it, but it would have been just barely. Because it's not, 50 isn't a pass.
Right.
70 is a pass.
Right.
So
now, is there continued education in your recertification?
No.
Okay.
There is no recertification. I'm good for life, dude.
So that's what I would like to see. here with like apprenticeship programs and stuff is I would love to see them force and say, so like with doctors and nurses, there's no continued certification, there's continued education hours each year. It drives me nuts, I guess, for like ATMC accreditation for schools that the instructor is like, oh yeah, 15 hours and there's no real requirement of like who the training's from. It needs to be higher. Now, what that number has to be, my opinion, is going to be a lot different than other people's opinions. But if you take enough training, like this, one of the arguments is, well, how do we make sure the training is good? Well, if they take enough of it, it doesn't matter if it, I don't want to say it doesn't matter if it's good or bad, but enough hours of training, there's going to be good training in it. Like I talk about, I take hundreds of hours of training a year. Do some of the classes that I sit in suck? Yeah, some of them that I, watch and I'm like, this isn't great information. But there might be one little thing that the person says and I'm like, I didn't know that before. And now all of a sudden I got one thing out of a class that was kind of mediocre. Well, if you take hundreds of hours of it and you get one mediocre thing out of each class, then all of a sudden you have a lot of knowledge. So I would like to see that part of it. And that was kind of, I guess I wondered that with Red Seal, if there was anything like that. So that's good to know there's not.
No. And like, I don't know if we're ever going to see it get revamped up here. I really don't, because it was, I mean, it's been around a long time. Like it's probably been a recognized way of doing it up here for, I'd bet you 50 years. Like we talk all the time, ASE is nothing up here. It's not even recognized. There's one Canadian Tire, the biggest chain store, has some kind of, they'll advertise in their waiting room area that like they have ASE certified mechanic, but the people that are sitting there have no idea what that means. You know what I mean? Like it's just, it's not, because it's not like other shops where you might see it on somebody's sleeve and you go, okay, I recognize that symbol. There's no recognition up here really of the symbol. So for people, it doesn't really, it's just another logo on a shirt, right? And whereas everybody for years, you used to walk into any shop and they used to take your certification, I have it hanging on the wall right in front of me with your name, your date of when it was issued to you, your Red Seal. And that was, they would hang in the waiting rooms of shops, and it would show them that, okay, we've got 20 Class A Red Seal certified techs in here. That was what, so that's, everybody used to say, oh, your dad's a mechanic, is he Class A certified? That kind of stuff. It was what we in Canada up here have been programmed to look for, Class A. And Class A is not even it anymore. They don't even refer to it. But it's like, you got a Red Seal? Yeah, I got a Red Seal. It needs to be revamped, because you will work with a guy, for instance, that, like I said, he wrote it in 1978 and he's still licensed, right? And this is not running him down, but I mean, if say since 1988, he's been predominantly a alignment and front end type tech.
That's, I would say, front end guy. Yeah. Yep.
And I'm not picking on front end guys. I'm not saying they're dumb. People are going to listen to this and go, he's got real hate on. No, but it's, you know what I mean? Like the technology kind of stays the same, right?
Yep.
It's angles and work practices. The technology that's going on from a set of points to a carburetor to an EFI to port fuel to EV, huge difference.
Yeah.
Right? But the guy that's maybe is Class A, the next day he could be expected to go and work on an EV. Well, you're a Class A tech up here, right? You're Class A. He might not even be good on EFI, right?
Yeah.
Or electrical diagnostics. And we're going to give him an EV. That happens, Tanner. That happens in shops up here. It's just the way. So it's more important. Certification, like ASE, we hear that, well, that just means somebody passed the test. Sure. Yeah. But, it means more than that, because if they pass the test, it means that they had the initiative to take the test and they have some kind of understanding. Yes, I understand maybe they overcomplicate it when they get under the hood of a car and it just doesn't fire for them. But they understand something that's going on. If I wrote my test when it was carburetors, and I never touched a fuel system, an injection system, Do you mean to tell me I'm going to be able to sit down and talk to him about the difference between a wideband and a conventional oxygen sensor? No, he's not going to have a clue, right?
Yeah.
But he might make the same money an hour as somebody your age that's only really been exposed in the industry to that newer type of technology, right? So up here, we see without recertification, we do see a lot of guys aging out that, man, they started to let their skills slip, you know? And it's sometimes they can be an obstacle for getting young people into the shops. Unfortunately, as much as that sucks, that's the reality. I've worked with a lot of guys older that weren't strong at that kind of work. They were good techs, but they weren't strong at diag. They didn't have that process. Well, you may watch them get dispatched some work that they have no business touching. And you're sitting over there going, I can't believe he's going down that road that he's going down. Okay, I'm just going to enjoy the show here. And like, and then maybe they hand it to you and you fix it and you're paid $6 less an hour because that person has 25 years of experience in the industry. You've got 5. Why would I pay you? Who's worth more right now? Who's more valuable right now? Right?
Yeah.
This is the argument that nobody really in the industry wants to sit down and talk turkey about and be flat up, frank, honest about. And I see both sides of the argument. It's a tough one. But I mean, really, who is worth more to you right now? Like,
right.
Just solve that car, you know? And this is the problem, I think, is going to be always the obstacle of certification and recertification with the industry is that who is the one that decides what is competency? What is qualified? Who is it? Right? Like, is it somebody like, do they have to be a super whiz technical trainer that can decide? So who is the person that's going to be deciding what is the level that is acceptable? Who do we get? Do we get a guy do we take a John Thornton? Do we take a Brandon Steckler? Somebody of that technical expertise and say, this is, and they write the whole list of what's to be certified, you know, and then you could have your detractors that say, okay, well, those guys are really great at, you know, the electrical and the drivability. How do we determine who's going to be the one that's certified for front end, brakes, suspension, air conditioning? Like, who does it all? You know?
Yeah.
This is the problem. Up here, we just had our manual rewritten a few years ago because our manual up here as to what is classified as certified is tied very much into the same manual as to what is possible for a car to be safetied and what's not. There's not a whole lot of gray area anymore. They let it right down to, you know, this has to work. This has to work. You can't have cracks in the glass. You can't have, you know, brake measurements have to be this. Tire tread depths have to be that. You know, brake lines can be rusted as long as they're intact. They pass. That kind of stuff. Right. So how do we ever get everybody in this industry on a unified front to say, we all agree that this is what should be the level? I don't think we can. It's like saying we have to write a code book, right? We hear other trades talk, well, the code book is this, the code book is that. We don't have that here. You know, as much as we think we do with the Red Seal or ASE or whatever, we don't have a code book for this industry. We need one.
Right. Yeah.
Who's going to write it?
Yeah. And that's why I guess my argument is always like the training side of it. So I think everybody's always going to disagree. And I think that's why the medical field, you know, went that way, as they're like, same thing. Who writes it? How do they decide? So instead they go, yeah, you take a certification when you get out, it's on a bell curve and, you know, X amount of people pass, X amount of people fail. And then after that, we just expect you to do continue education credit, and hopefully you take enough continuing education that some of it's good, some of it's bad, and you get something out of it. And then there's no trying to like write I guess, what it should be or how you do certification. And then the other thing that does is forces people who, like you were saying, who had certified back when EFI wasn't a thing. Now all of a sudden they're forced to keep taking classes.
Yeah.
And so that's my thing, I guess, is I hope to see it go that way someday. I don't know if it will. I know that's, if I ever get the chance to, I guess, do some leaning on the U.S. and the U.S. says, okay, we got to do something because of autonomous driving or something. And I can say, yeah, that's fine. Get people trained and, it'll work itself out. But whether they go that way or not, we'll have to see.
Well, it's like Lucas always talks about the barrier of entry, right? But I mean, we don't really know what that's going to be.
Right.
It's a term that's getting tossed around a lot. But I don't think anybody has come down yet and said this is definitely going to be it. Is because they used to say that it was going to be like hybrids were going to be the barrier of entry. And I know lots of shops that service hybrids that, they service the car, but they don't necessarily do the hybrid repairs, right? So They're going to be like, well, and because they talked about it at ASTE, there's a lot of repairs you can do on an EV and so on and so forth. You're not in any danger at all, right? You're not, like, it's perfectly safe. There's, you got to watch the air conditioning system on some because it's whatever. But I mean, you can service a lot of that car without any kind of warning or threat to yourself. Like, it didn't stop people from, oh, that's a Prius. No, I can't do that brake job. Like, I mean,
right. Exactly.
What do you see? So we were talking earlier about mentorship and stuff, but when you're going into the shops, is that the biggest, you think, thing that's lacking right now in the industry is mentorship? Or do you think where do you see, like, when you see techs struggle and you say, okay, they need more training, do they need more training because they're not taking the initiative on their own, or it's a culture thing?
I think a little bit of both. So I think I think it's very hard for shops to find training, I guess, in the aspect of, so I'm very involved, you're very involved with Facebook, and we see it. The people who don't have Facebook, a lot of my shops, they go to me all the time, hey, you're going to this training this month, you're going to this training. How did you find out about that? And I'm like, it's posted on Facebook, or it's posted on Diagnostic Network, or it used to be posted on IATN. But if they're not involved, and like now when I'm like, oh, it was posted on Diagnostic Network, they're like, what's that? Yeah. And they weren't involved with IATN. And so because of that, they don't know about the training, so they haven't gotten the training. So then the technicians that are working for them also aren't getting the training. The shop is, I don't want to call it subpar, but we'll call it subpar as far as training goes. And so now we're like kind of the blind leading the blind. In the colleges, in my personal opinion, the idea of having like a 2-year school for automotive now is kind of, should be a thing of the past. Like trying to teach brakes, suspension, steering, automatic transmissions, manual, and everything with electronics in 2 years is like virtually impossible.
Yeah. No.
So I think we really should be doing like the mechanical side of it in 2 years. And then if they want to really dive into all the systems, I mean, I think about now with just adding ADAS, like that's a completely different thing that now has to be added into the curriculum in the same amount of time.
Yep.
Like you could take months to go over how radar works and how cameras work and stuff at 2 hours a day. Like it's literally going to take you months to teach that to your college students. So you've added something into the curriculum. Now they're going to get less and less. So at any rate, the college programs, I just don't think are getting the students career ready. And they're like, oh, well, they'll learn when they get to the shop. Well, not if the shop also is not trained. And so the shops don't know about the training, which then leads to them not being trained, the technicians not being trained. We don't have any mentorship programs aside from like Toyota T10 and GM ASEP and Ford. But if they kick them to the dealer, like I talked about before, they're probably not getting mentored.
Yeah.
The states have not done a great job here. North Carolina has a good apprenticeship program. They're one of the like very few that does. Most of them do not. New York didn't have any type of apprenticeship program when I was up there. We had inspections, but the inspection certification thing was honestly kind of a crock, truthfully.
Yeah.
Like it just wasn't, you went in there for like, I don't know, I think it was like an hour or 2 hour class or something. But so like, I don't know, there just is a lot of problems there, I guess, thinking through of getting people more involved. So I think it's a multiple, part problem there.
Up here, what we had when I was going through high school, and I think it's still a thing, is we had what we call co-op, which was like while you were still in high school, normally like so it would be my third and fourth year of high school, you could go and work like 3 days a week so it didn't necessarily have to be a shop, but it would be, you want to be culinary, you want to do a chef, you're going to go work in, say, somebody would take you on in a restaurant or a catering business or something like that. If you wanted to work in a shop, they'd say, okay, you're going to come in 3 days a week, say from 10 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon. You're going to just shadow the mechanics, you're going to follow them around. I think that because as we've taken more and more auto shop out of schools, high school, secondary, we need to get, if we want people back in, we as an industry need to be approaching the high schools and saying, hey, if you have, a student that is interested in this, can we figure out some way that you get them credits and they come and work in the shop and get an exposure to it? Because I think you and I would agree, I'd rather get them before they've graduated, get them exposed to it. If they turn around and go, oh, this isn't what I thought it was going to be, now I can go back to school and choose a different career, right? Yep. I hate to see the kids come all the way through high school, take a 2-year college program, then they get on the shop floor in a dealership. The culture kills their enthusiasm for it, and they go say, F this, I'm picking a completely different trade. That happens way too much, right? I'd rather get them when they're, and it's tough, like when they're 14 years old, 15 years old, they can't even really drive the car, right? So, I mean, like, but I want them to see, okay, this is how this guy is going to do 5 alignments today. This guy's going to do 10 sets of tires today. This guy's got a head off that, Cadillac over there. Go see those steps involved in that kind of job, right? Go watch that guy hook a scan tool up and see the process that he has to go through in Diag. Look at him doing that ADAS calibration. When you start to expose them to that kind of level, they don't just think we're putting tires and brakes on all day long or we're changing oil. They realize the level of what's going on. Then I think we can get some of the younger people really fired up and want to be in this industry. But I think we have to be going to the high schools and saying, we want your kids now, right? Give them credits. We'll pay them a little bit of money, like up here. That's the other thing. And it really, really irritates me. When you hire an apprentice on in a shop up here, their pay is subletted from the government. So you get a big old check from the government for employing them. So what a lot of the dealers do is you may hire a kid, he only wants to change oil. He has no business. He don't want to be a mechanic. He just doesn't want to stand there and sell coffee at Tim Hortons. So he wants to change oil in the car. So that's cool. They take those kids and sign them up immediately as an apprentice because the government kicks in 60% of their wages, right? They have no intention of ever transitioning them past the lubrac. They have no intentions of seeing them develop into, a tech. But man, I got that 60% sublet. That's, I'm essentially now what was a loss leader oil change. Hey, the margin's pretty good on it now, right? When 60% of their wages for the day is paid for by the government.
Right.
So that's when I see the apprenticeship programs and the incentivized stuff from the government. That's something I don't want to see keep happening, right? It's like, okay, yes, we're going to help you with their wages, but in turn, you've got to be actually doing the right by them. You have to be pushing them into where we need them to be. Yeah. We're failing miserably at that up here, I feel, anyway. It's just that's how we can still do an oil change for $34.95 because I've got a whole bunch of quick lube kids that minimum wage is $16, 6% of that's paid by the government. Bang, 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 done. It's not as terrible as it was. Those kids never get a chance to shadow a lot of techs unless they're like shirking their duties as a quick lube person to actually go and seem interested. And then the foreman or the manager says, oh, okay, we're actually going to take the next step with them. It's not fair. There should be a much more laid out program of when they come in, this is going to be your basic task. And I don't mean pushing a broom around or taking the garbage out, right? I mean, like, this is what you need to learn. That's the best part of our apprenticeship program is up here is it's laid out as your, what we call common core. You're going to go there and you're going to learn pretty much how not to drop the car on yourself. You're going to learn how not to get hurt. You're going to learn how, righty tighty, lefty loosey. You're going to learn that, you don't put a metric bolt in a standard hole. All stuff that seems very basic. You're going to learn that, right? Because we need you to learn that. And then the next year this is what, by the time your 10 weeks is done, we want you to have an understanding of this concept, right? And Ohm's law and 4 strokes of an engine and like so on and so forth. And it gets pretty laid out. I think we need that in this industry because if we don't have it, there's so much, it's the wild, wild west from what you might learn in one shop to what you might learn in another. I mean, it already is still like that. But at least if everybody in the industry kind of had a set path to go down, we get some kind of standardization, some kind of cohesiveness. And you could say, okay, so instead of this alphabet tech stuff, oh, he's an A tech or B tech or C tech, up here, like the first time Brian Pollock says to me, trying to hire, I'm like, you're trying to hire what? B tech? What the heck is a B tech? Like, we don't use that up here. It's not known, right? It's just
right.
We don't. So, and you still see all the time guys arguing in the groups and whatnot, going, well, that's not really an A tech's job, or that's not really a B tech, or like a C tech should. It's all too confusing, right? It's all too confusing.
Agreed.
We just
100%.
We need to. It's like, okay, so can you do an alignment? Okay, cool. All right, alignments are good. Okay, you got a broken bolt off in an engine. Can you go get a welder and, weld a nut to that and take it back out? No? Okay. That's all right too. That doesn't mean that you're a terrible mechanic. You might work in some place. Hell, I welded more in the last 2 years than I ever did in the 20 some years before my career. Right? Yeah. In the dealership, we didn't weld. We didn't even have a working welder.
Yeah.
What would you need that for? Right. And then you get out of there and it's like you're dealing on rust and a lot of older stuff. And, then you start to do a lot more exhaust manifold jobs. And it's like, I got to remember how to MIG here. Right. And it's like, I'm now in a shop where I might have to stitch in, a body panel, right, to pass the safety. Like, does that make, and then you might take hire a guy that's never done that, put him in a shop, and you go, oh, he's not that qualified. He can't weld.
Right. And if he came from a shop that never did and didn't have it, yeah, exactly. I'm lucky in all the different experiences I've had. But I mean, I can remember going and working in a truck shop. I hadn't welded. And they're like, oh, what kind of mechanic are you? You can't weld. I'm going to go over there and see that truck that nobody can get to start. I'm going to have it running in 2 hours. That's what kind of mechanic I am, right? You're a great welder. Maybe you should be a welder. I'm a technician. And see, that's like, for years I was that way when it'd be like, go over there and do that. I'm like, nah, I'm a tech. I'm not a welder. As an example, right? Or go put a floor pan in that, patch that floor pan up. No, I'm not a body man. Like I'm a technician. As this stuff becomes more specialized, I don't know what the solution is in that. Is whether it becomes like when I was talking with Brendan Dills, if you're going to be like, you're just going to work on one portion of the car. Like you're going to be an ADAS guy, but if the engine needs diag, somebody else is going to be doing that. And I don't know if that's the solution or not, Tanner. I really don't. But I see it maybe going that way because I just think there's too much now that we all need to know. Yeah, there's definitely going to be a division, and I think it's already happened now in mechanical, in diagnostic or electrical and ADAS and stuff. And I see it as, the it's very, very few and far between that technicians can do diagnostics and do mechanical stuff. When I was doing mechanical stuff, I was a terrible flat rate tech. I never made money on flat rate. I couldn't turn a lot of hours because I was very picky on how I did stuff. Being in the Rust Belt, when I did brakes, I wanted to sandblast the caliper areas and stuff so the brakes fit back in instead of grinding the edge of brake pads. And so stuff like that. And now I look at it and I go, I'm making money just doing the diagnostic side of it. And I see so many shops at this point where I walk in and I'm like, now some of them will try to fix a car before they call me. Other ones have gotten to where they go, I don't have anybody here that can do this, and we don't even want to do it. We're focused on tires, brakes. The place that I'm building my house, the area I'm building my house in, at the bottom of the hill, there's a shop, and they've used me twice so far since I went over there and introduced myself. Mm-hmm. When I introduced myself, the guy goes, I might use you once in a while, but I do tires and oil changes, and once in a great while brakes, because I don't really want to do brakes either. I just want to do oil changes and tires. And he's a tire shop, independent tire shop, but that's all he wants to do. He has no intentions to do anything outside of that. Oh, and he's a U-Haul shop too. Great shop, works out good because he's in a very small town and people need oil changes, and that's all he cares to do. And he's probably late 50s, early 60s. So I think we'll see more of that. I think we'll see, shops that we're at a point where we're going to see guys that are of certain age and they're retiring or near retirement. So they're not going to want to reinvest. But I think you'll see even people, I'm 33. I think you'll see people that are my age that go, I don't want to do the diagnostics, or I only want to do the diagnostics, or I only want to do tires. I mean, we know at this point that some people will argue that tires aren't profitable, but like, the tire stores that's all they do have made it profitable. So it's profitable if that's all you're doing. So like, I do think that we'll see that. I think we'll see companies that start to just specialize in certain things, and ADAS stuff with body shops right now. There's companies that's all they're doing is ADAS calibrations, and they're not even really programming anything. They show up, do the ADAS calibration, and if it needs programming, because there's body shops that I go to that I'm programming stuff and they're calling somebody else for ADAS stuff. So it's, it depends. I think you'll see more specialization for sure.
I think I think it has to go that way, right? And it's just, how do we entice the young people? Because to me, if I did nothing but ADAS all day, I'd be bored to tears. I would get out of it so fast, it would drive me. I'd be even programming. If I did nothing but programming all day, it would drive me crazy, because it's just like, you show up, you program. It's like in the dealer, I would do sometimes 10 by noon. You know what I mean? Like, they release more and more, you just do. It's just second nature. If I had to drive around and do that on all the different makes and models, I'd lose my mind. I don't know how the guys do it. I don't know how you do it. Like, it's just, when I look at the tooling and then the training that you have to do, it doesn't interest me. But at the same time, I see these guys and I watch them on YouTube or whatever, like Paul Danner and any of those guys, and it's like the cars that come in, or they go there and they try to solve that problem. Like, it is just, you don't know what you're walking into, right? Like, you're walking into it and you lift the hood and there's a whole bunch of different parts and the ECM's not bolted in and the wiring harness is laying across the top of the engine. And when you're in that point, you can't just close the hood and go, okay, I'm going to give you $150 service call feedback. I don't want to touch this. Like, that does happen, right? But I mean, if you do it too many times, you don't have anything. You don't have a career. You don't have a job.
So I'm real bad about, I call the problem hero syndrome. And that's, you get to a car, you're like, I'm going to fix it. And a lot of dealerships are guilty of this. Bring it here, we'll fix it. It's some crazy intermittent thing. If I get a phone call and somebody says it's intermittent, as soon as they're like, hey, I got this intermittent, I go, hold on. How intermittent? Once a month, once every 2 weeks. I don't care what the car is. I don't care what the problem is. I don't even care at that point. I'm not getting involved with it. Can't make any money on it. So I'm out. If I get to a shop and I open the hood and the car is an absolute disaster, or I open the door and the car is like destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
I walk back in the shop and I'm like, yeah, I'm not touching it. You shouldn't touch it. There's no money for either one of us to make on this. I'm out. Have a nice day. And I don't charge them if it's a good customer. If it's a bad customer, sometimes I'll charge them for going out there. Most of the time, I have enough cars for the day that I'm like, I'm just moving on. And like I say, I try to like base my business on that we're all partners, all of my shops, and I want to help them. And if I don't think there's money to be made on a car, then I'm not doing it. I don't want them to mess with it. So many times I just walk away from stuff. Now, there's a lot of cars that I diagnose, so it's not that I walk away from anything hard. That's certainly not it. But if the car's like an absolute disaster, like I had one, I don't know, 2 months ago, and it was a Buick that wasn't really, well, what I consider not that old. It was like a 2011, but everybody had been into it. And like the more I start looking around, it had a 5-volt reference problem. And the ECT sensor plug was destroyed and everything was RTV'd in. Oh. So I'm like, okay, that's a problem. Then I went to the oil pressure sensor and all of the wires were bare at the oil pressure sensor and they had been all twisted up. And I went to the cam sensor and they were all bare there. And I'm like, nah, we're done. Cause like there was so much stuff and it was every one of those sensors that was on that circuit. Yeah. The wires were bare on and the plugs were broken. And I went back in to the office and I'm like, I'm not touching it. You guys shouldn't touch it. It was a used car that was at a shop. I'm like, that car is done. Like it's time for it to go away. I explained it. I took some pictures of it, charged them for my time of looking at it and just explained to them like, this is why it needs to go away. Mm-hmm. And they were happy. And then the used car dealer that had it, he was kind of obviously disappointed, I'm sure, but he also knew not to sell the car and not get in upside down and just get rid of it.
Yeah. And that's so... It always makes me shake my head, and sometimes I get really mad because, like, you'll see the guys and they'll put up a video on YouTube or whatever, right? And you're seeing all this stuff that's obvious, and you can't, like, I sometimes forget that a lot of the time it is a car lot that maybe own the car, and that's why they're. But I look at it and go, if that's Mrs. Smith's car, and Mrs. Smith's got 3 connector plugs that are shot. Somebody else that has looked at this car, I'm sure, has given Mrs. Smith an estimate, and Mrs. Smith has decided that's too much money and is looking for somebody that's going to do it cheaper. That makes me want to pull my hair out. And I realize now that that's not normally the reality. The reality is like somebody just that doesn't touch this stuff at all, has a nightmare car, they drop it in somebody's lap like yourself, and you look at it and you go, yeah, this is going to need a whole lot. And then you decide, okay, we're going to fix it or not. I used to get so triggered because I always used to jump to the conclusion that the customer is just cheap. And that's why these problem cars are not fixed. The reality is that, yes, okay, maybe somebody cheap took it to the wrong person. And that's how it started to get butchered and hacked. But a lot of it is now is people are looking at these cars and they're not charging enough to start out. They're not saying X, Y, and Z need to be put back to like new status before we can even go down this road. Are you willing to commit to that? No? Okay, I'll collect my service fee. I'm on to the next one. If we can start to get this industry to do that, then we can start to see a lot of these problem cars become a little bit more profitable. But I think right now, until we get over the hurdle of some guys that, still want to like roll the diag into the repair cost or whatever. we're not going to get, you know what I mean, Tanner? We're not going to get them on with the idea that you have to restore it to, a much closer to like OE or new process before we can start to do it. Because at the end of the day, even if you've got one of those plugs isn't your problem, the liability of thing and leaving it in there like that, this doesn't help you at all, right? Just because it's not the cause of your issue you're having right now. We all know in this industry, if I walk away and leave that there like that, it could come back to bite me or bite that customer in the butt. And then are we really advocating for the customer at that point? No, we're not. We're just we're back to the same old thing of let's just cheap it, as cheap as possible. Makes me want to just scream some days. Like,
the learning how to be profitable with diagnostics, learning what to say no to, what to say yes to, learning not to say, oh yeah, I diagnosed it, you're going to repair it, I'm going to, roll the fee into it. That's one of the things I guess that I have found that me having this business here has greatly benefited all of my shops is my fee is high enough that they're like, I can't take it on the chin. Now, when I first started the business, most of them were taking it on the chin. And I slowly got more expensive and more expensive. And now they're like, man, that's a lot of money. I can't take it on the chin. And I go, okay, I've said from day one, don't take it on the chin. Call the customer. I give them like a set price of where this is the maximum that I'm going to charge you, so they have something to tell the customer.
Right.
And then they go to the customer and the customer okays it. And I'm fine with if they make markup with it, because I am not talking to the customer. So whatever they want to do, they can do. But getting them to okay that amount of money up front with the customer for testing, and then all of a sudden the customer pays it. And now I've had this business now 5 years. Now all of a sudden their customers are paying for testing. And they never used to pay for testing. They used to roll the diagnostics into the repair. Now the customer's paying for testing because I forced them into doing that. And it's kind of like I guess training. Sounds terrible. One of my customers is going to listen to this and hate me for it, but it is what it is. It's like training a dog. Like I, backed them into doing it this way without them realizing that that's what I did. So now they have to charge for testing, and they stop rolling the fee into the repair because they've already okayed the testing fee with the customer ahead of time. So now hopefully someday when I sell, like, they continue to do that. But
do you ever think they ever have a light bulb moment and they go, my God, how much money did I not make the last 5 years because I was just rolling that? You know what I mean? Like, we all see the owners talk about this and that and the other thing, but man, that'd make me want to just like cry into my hands. If I thought all of a sudden now I have all these customers that will pay, and for years I didn't charge for. Yeah. Like, that's a sickening amount of money when you think about it, right?
And it gets even worse when they're like, well, I'm $80 an hour, let's say. And I'm like, your customer just okayed $180 an hour. Like, they, so just throwing those numbers out there, whether that's what they are or not, but like realizing that, okay, this is what I thought I could charge, and now all of a sudden I'm charging this and the customer is still okaying it. And I'm like, they okayed this amount. Like, this was 2 hours of testing or whatever. Like, and a lot of times they don't even, sometimes they know I'm there. Other times they don't know that I'm there. The shop calls me and then they quote it out to their customer. And I'm like, you're getting X amount per hour because of me, but on your own, you don't think you deserve it and your customer won't pay it. But I'm proving that they do. And after they do that for, a year of using me or something, they're like, do you think I could charge more? And I'm like, I don't know. What do you think? You're obviously charging more when I'm here and they're not batting an eye at it. So yeah, you could charge more. Like,
do you think, Tanner, you doing that is kind of, because I've asked a couple of the other guests on here, are you keeping some of the shops that maybe should be, I don't want to...
Definitely. Yeah. I know where you're going. Keeping shops that should be closed going. Well, so...
And understand, I'm not faulting you for doing it, right? It's not a...
No, you're good.
It's not a...
Everyone asks me this, you're good. So I would say some guys definitely do. And I would say that I do have a handful of shops that I'm definitely keeping alive. But those shops that are the handful that I'm keeping alive, I've already had that conversation with them of, look, you need to be considering retirement. Like, we are moving towards that and looking at selling your business. So again, with me, I'm very much partnering with my shops, trying to help them. I have guys that are ready for retirement. I have guys that are looking to buy shops that are my age. So I try to bring them together. I've tried to work out a couple different deals with them. So the shops that are just waiting out their time, they know. And like, we're very open with each other about, like, you need to be looking at selling. You need to be considering this. There's some shops that I go to that I'm like, and I'll only go like 1 or 2 times. I walk in them and I'm like, this shop should not be operating at all. And I just cut them off. And I had to cut one off last year that was like that. He used me 3 times. All 3 times I told him, I said, look, I'd prefer you go get some training. And we kept talking about it. Finally, the 3rd time I told him I couldn't help him anymore. And 3 months later, the doors closed and that was the end of his business. So, the ones that I guess are good people that I know they've had a shop for 40 years, let's say, they were a successful business person. They're at the end, of their career. And now I'm helping them to stay there until they can retire, which is in another couple of years. And then we'll take that shop and sell that shop. I'll help them sell it to somebody else. There's a couple of the shops that won't get sold. They're literally waiting for the city to buy them. They're multi-million-dollar properties that the cities are going to buy. So they're like, I got to make it to 65 so I can collect, insurance or Medicaid or whatever. So I'm helping them get to that point. But the shops that are like really bad, that are like, they got another 20 years ahead of them, I don't really help those shops. The other thing I do, and I've done a terrible job of it lately, when I moved here, I was also teaching for CarQuest in this area, and then WorldPack and stuff. So I stopped doing that a couple of years ago, kind of pre-COVID. Eventually, I'll go back and start doing more of that. So all of my shops will be participating in training too. So the shops that I'm kind of like, I guess that I would consider that need help will be not forced into getting training, but just like everything else, I'll kind of back them into that and say, hey, we're having this. It's going to be a night of hanging out and everyone's going to come. But by the way, we're going to do an hour class first and then we'll all hang out. And so they'll all eventually get more out of it.
They're going to be around you and they're going to get immersed into it, whether they like it or not. It's exactly. It sounds kind of like you're almost like a matchmaker for, people that are getting out and people that want to expand into their own business, right? That's kind of it's a neat spin on that, really. That's the networking thing, right? You know a younger person that wants to buy a shop, an older person that wants to get rid of one. I never thought of that. It's a neat angle.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've gotten a lot of shops. I had 2 or 3 shops come to Vision this year. AST, I had like 5 or 6 shops come to AST. I joke all the time that eventually for probably Vision and SEMA, we'll like charter a private jet. We'll get enough people and charter a private jet and go to it. So that's the other thing. And right now I just made a change with the business too. I changed the business phone so that I could send out text messages and it not be flagged. So the goal will be any big training events, we'll send out text messages to all my shops and say, hey, this is going on, just so you're aware. And then we'll start doing local training too in the South Carolina, North Carolina area. A lot of this stuff's kind of waiting until I'm done with my house. Probably November-ish, my house will be done. So once that's done, then we'll start doing a lot more training. But the goal is to force all those shops that are the shops that I would argue that I'm keeping alive, we'll force them into becoming better shops.
You've been to Lucas's new facility?
I have not been up to it since it's finished.
Yeah.
So he's about 2 hours north of me, 2.5 hours north of me. I was up there quite a few times while it was being built. I haven't been up since it was finished.
He says you're not a fan of driving in those mountains. He says that that's really something you're really super keen on, right? Lucas has that reputation of being like a little bit of a nut behind the wheel, right? And I was sitting in the back of when we were at AST, I was riding in the back and David was white knuckling, and I was just like, "What's the big deal? Lucas drives the way I drive." So, and Lucas is what he said is that for the most part, he was pretty restrained that night. He wasn't nearly, but he said that you guys have had some fun drives together. So
he lit a truck on fire with me. That was the first one. That was unintentional. We were driving a customer's vehicle for a drivability problem, and it had 2 bad coils and dumped so much fuel into the cats that it lit the cats on fire.
Nice.
When we stopped at the gas station, pulled up to the gas pump. So that was one. And then the other one, he had a Jeep up there that the frame is rotted out on, and so are all the brake lines. Now, obviously, most of the rest of the southern people don't understand that's a thing. Yeah. Me being from the north, I'm like, look, this thing potentially has no brakes. Well, behind his shop, he has this hill that you go up. It's a mountain. So he lives in the mountains. And you go up this mountain, and it's a goat path that goes up the mountain where he parks all these dead cars. So he's like, oh, yeah, you're just going to drive this Jeep down. We're going to take it to the school and donate it because the frame is rotted out and the brake lines are rotted out. And I'm like, that's fine and dandy, but I got to bring this thing down a mountain and there's no brakes. And he's like, to this day, he's like, oh, there's brakes. I'm like, there was sort of brakes, like what was left of the reserve pedal that had left, but like that was it. And I didn't know where I was going.
Right.
So yeah, he likes to pick on me about that, but he lives up. So he's about probably 5,000 foot elevation, 5,800 foot, because Mount Mitchell that's near him is 6,800, but the two ski resorts that are next to him, I think, are like between 5 and 5,800 feet of elevation. So he's up there quite a ways. I'm in the mountains here, but I'm only at like roughly 1,000 to like 2,500 foot of elevation.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so he's in the middle of, well, kind of the middle of nowhere. Boone's a nice, like, quaint little town, and yeah.
He's I'm trying to make a road trip maybe to go down for the barbecue on the 4th.
You should do it, because I will be up there. I'm going to go up there on the 4th. So if you do it, it's anybody that's listening to this, the drive through the mountains. I talked about taking like time off and taking weekends off. Just getting out and driving, finding some place to drive. That was another like big reason of why we ended up where we are. Driving through the mountains, the stuff that you can see, like, I don't know, it's very different. People don't think about North Carolina as being a mountainous area, but man, is it mountainous, and, you know, beautiful, beautiful scenery, and it's definitely worth doing.